monster is said to live in Loch Ness. And similar creatures have been seen in lakes, rivers and seas all over the world. Some believe they're relics from the age of the dinosaurs.
The overwhelming mass of evidence indicates that there is no possibility that this is fraudulent. These animals are extremely rare, but as I say, they're there.
I believe I saw on that occasion and subsequent occasions an unknown animal that dwells in this lake that is yet to be classified by science.
But there's a problem.
It's not like there's been any bodies found. You have to sort of ask yourself, why do these things thrive in the absence of hard evidence?
Bring me a specimen. Scientists like to see evidence of things. They like to see legitimate, believable evidence.
What is that?
So how do we explain the thousands of sightings?
Maybe if you imagine a monster snake, just, it's stuck its humps out of the water.
All of a sudden, this little black head sticks up out of the water, opens up its mouth, and it started growling at us.
Do giant unknown creatures ply our waterways, living in depths that science has yet to penetrate? Believers and skeptics alike examine the evidence, photographs and video footage, strange sonar readings, and enormous mounds of flesh that have washed up on beaches around the world as science and the supernatural collide beneath the waves. From early times, monsters of the deep have appeared in myths and legends, the manifestation of our fear of unknown aquatic depths. But by the 20th century, it seemed that humans had discovered everything there was to discover beneath the waves, that the age of exploration and science had slain our deep water dragons. But every now and then, the seas spit forth something unexpected. Something like the coelacanth, a fish that was supposed to have been extinct for 65 million years. Or the bizarre megamouth shark that confounded marine biologists in 1976. The discovery of these real sea monsters also sparked a renewed interest in the legends of lake monsters. The most famous of these legends started in a beautiful lake in the Scottish Highlands. The first modern sighting of the Loch Ness Monster was recorded in 1930. But it was in the spring of 1933 that the legend of Nessie really took off.
When did you see it and where?
Right here at the southwest end of Loch Ness.
What was it like?
Oh, very like a swan, long neck, small head, and one big hump about 30 feet long.
Just had one big hump and a head something like a dog.
What was it like?
Like an elephant's back or an upturned boat.
Over the summer, in one encounter after another, people described seeing the same creature in Loch Ness, an enormous, prehistoric-looking animal with a long neck and a snake-like head.
Many people see this as nonsense.
It's not rubbish. I saw it and I believe in it now.
Nessie sparked a media frenzy and a lot of photographs, including this iconic picture that we'll look at in more depth later. Since Nessie's spectacular debut, lake monsters have been spotted around the world. There is Champ in Lake Champlain in the United States, Ogopogo in Canada's Lake Okanagan, Morgar off the coast of England, and the Lake Sturgeon monster in Sweden, who has recently been put on the endangered species list. And on the Pacific coast of North America, there have been hundreds of sightings.
It does not lead automatically to the idea that if enough people tell the story, therefore it must be true. life, they function in essence outside of science as we understand it. They function in the realm of myth or fable or fantasy.
As a scientist, I can't believe my fellow scientific vertebrate people are not doing anything about this very challenging scientific problem.
One thing that lake and sea monsters have in their favour is a long history of sober, sane and unshakable witnesses. John Kirk, an employee of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, has seen the alleged monster in British Columbia's Lake Okanagan several times.
And I witnessed, first of all, a very large, what appeared to be reptilian head swimming in the middle of Okanagan Lake. And immediately behind it was a very long neck, and then ultimately a succession of about 4 or 5 humps.
Tyler Ennis, a trained biologist and the son of a commercial fisherman, saw something similar off the coast of British Columbia.
The body looked like it was just consistently rolling through the water. There was about 6, 7 humps. The humps were out of the water by at least 3 or 4 feet. The thickness of the body was at least a foot or so thick. I watched it for about 20 seconds or so, give or take, and then it went underneath the water.
Bob Iverson grew up on the sea and spent his summers helping his father fish these waters.
And all of a sudden, these 3 great big humps come out of the water, and they look like big truck tires. And they're gone. And then they're back. 3 again, and they're gone. I'd never seen anything like that.
And then there is the series of terrifying encounters in San Francisco Bay, witnessed by twins Bill and Bob Clark.
It actually came towards us and growled at us. I was going to get out of the car, but because Bill screamed at me not to go out, I realized that, well, it isn't worth getting killed. I was afraid if he went to the edge of the water that it would grab him. You're looking at it in your mind because your mind doesn't think. Sea serpent.
We'll take a closer look at these sightings later, but first we return to the mother of all lake monsters, Nessie. 70 years after the Nessie craze began, there are still sightings at the Loch.
I suppose the standard answer to most people is that if you want to see the Loch Ness Monster, you spend 3 hours in the pub and you drink 1 or 2 good local Scotch malt whiskies. But I hadn't been drinking. No, it was definitely something alive.
I saw the classic 3 humps. I never thought that I would. This was 3 distinct humps, and the thing was that I watched it for 15 minutes and it was swimming against the current, slowly, but it was moving against the current.
The first recorded sighting of the Loch Ness Monster occurred in the 6th century, when an Irish monk was said to have chastised the vicious creature as it surfaced and ordered it back into the depths. But it wasn't until the string of sightings in the 1930s that Nessie hunting began in earnest. The London tabloids were desperate for a photograph. A local man named Hugh Gray got the first picture and instantly created a sensation in the world's press. Is this a picture of a lake monster? We'll take a closer look later on. Monster enthusiasts began to flock to Loch Ness, including a London surgeon named R. Kenneth Wilson, who, in 1934, captured this image. The classic photograph of Nessie. This iconic image was immediately dubbed the surgeon's photo, and it was obviously authentic because a doctor had taken it. The photograph fueled speculation that Nessie was a holdover from the age of the dinosaurs, called a plesiosaur, an aquatic reptile that was supposed to have been wiped out 65 million years ago. Is it possible that the deep, sheltered refuge of Loch Ness could have kept a relic plesiosaur population alive? Rewards for Nessie's capture inspired monster lovers to new heights of inventiveness. In 1934, for example, this optimistic team built a 35-ton steel cage to hold the beast. The legend of Nessie reached its peak in the 1960s and 70s, and even scientists were drawn into the hunt. In 1970 came the American invasion, led by Dr. Robert Rines and a team of scientists from the Academy of Applied Science. Using new side-scan sonar technology, they reported readings which indicated underwater life forms 10 to 50 times bigger than any known fish in the Loch. Rines would also release these contentious computer-enhanced photos taken underwater with motion control cameras, including the famous flipper shot and gargoyle head, all of them intriguingly plesiosaur-like. Even National Geographic got into the act, sending an all-star team led by oceanographer Bob Ballard, who would later discover the Titanic, and renowned underwater photographers Emery Christoph and David Dubélé. They had a high-tech research ship and used sonar-triggered underwater cameras, banks of strobe lights and underwater amplifiers, which could broadcast the sound of fish in distress. The team got some great shots of shoes, wine bottles and kettles, although they did put one Nessie mystery to rest. A suspected skeleton turned out to be a log. But despite these scientific setbacks, believers still clung to the so-called surgeon's photo of Nessie in profile. Then came the confession that shocked the lake monster world. For 60 years, the surgeon's photo of the Loch Ness monster had stood the test of time. Then, in 1992, a man named Christian Sperling made a shocking revelation. The photograph was the brainchild of his stepfather, Duke Weatherall, a flamboyant big game hunter sent to Loch Ness by the Daily Mail to capture Nessie on film. According to the stepson, when Duke failed in his task, the paper fired him, and he decided to get his revenge. He procured a toy submarine, then fashioned a Nessie-shaped head and neck to fit snugly over the conning tower. When his Nessie was seaworthy, he and his younger son, Ian Weatherall, launched their monster in the shallows of Loch Ness.
The water cold? A little further. Right, like that. That's perfect. Just like that, son.
Weatherall took a photograph.
I think we got it.
And the rest is history.
Let's go.
The seemingly majestic head and neck were all of 30 centimetres high. Weatherall then convinced London surgeon Dr. Kenneth Wilson to claim the photograph as his own. Perhaps Wilson was simply too overwhelmed by the publicity it generated to ever reveal the truth. Is the first photograph taken by Hugh Gray any more authentic? If we increase the contrast, the picture begins to look suspiciously like the head of a retriever dog, swimming with a stick in its mouth.
You look at the photographs without the framework that says, this is my version of the Loch Ness monster, you would never see these things as monster photographs. You'd see them as bad pictures out of focus of anything, but not a giant reptile.
In scientific terms, Nessie's long reign as the original lake monster is beginning to work against her. After 75 years of looking, why hasn't she been found? Sonar studies of the lake haven't revealed anything unusual in more than 5 years, and some of the most devoted Nessie fans now think that she may have died, the last of her kind, and her species is now extinct. But even if Nessie has gone to her final resting place somewhere on the floor of this spectacular loch, legends of lake monsters are very much alive. Take, for example, Lake Okanagan in British Columbia. Nessie has only been seen a dozen or so times and a handful of photographs taken. But the monster in this lake has been sighted by hundreds of people and even captured on videotape. Larger and deeper than Loch Ness, Okanagan is a perfect monster's lair. John Kirk works for Canada's Royal Mounted Police, and he's the author of In the Domain of Lake Monsters. He's collected hundreds of reported sightings. But he's certain that the creature in Lake Okanagan exists because he's seen it with his own eyes. The monster is known as Ogopogo.
Approximately 17 years ago, I had the most incredible experience I've ever had in my life, where I beheld for the first time an animal that wasn't catalogued by science.
And in August 1989, it happened again. This time, Kirk saw two creatures, less than 200 meters from shore. He described being able to see through the arches of their serpentine bodies as they moved across the lake.
I believe I saw on that occasion and subsequent occasions an unknown animal that dwells in this lake that is yet to be classified by science.
One scientist has tried to classify what eyewitnesses like John Kirk are seeing. Marine biologist Ed Bousfield.
If you see a large marine animal at the surface with two or more humps in tandem, one behind the other, there's nothing else it can be. It's Cadborosaurus.
Cadborosaurus wilsey is a creature compiled by Bousfield from hundreds of eyewitness descriptions. A reptile growing more than 20 meters long with a horse-like head, snake-like body and front flippers that can breathe underwater and move at speeds of up to 75 kilometers per hour. Most scientists think it's a fantasy, but Dr. Bousfield believes this is a real sea serpent that became a lake monster by accident.
They originated in the sea and migrated up the rivers, following the salmonoid fishes on which they prey. 70 years ago, there was a great period of dam building on the Columbia River. They are now landlocked in these lakes, like Lake Okanagan.
John Kirk agrees that it's possible this is the creature people are seeing in Okanagan. He's tracked hundreds of sightings over the years of a reptilian serpent-like creature ranging from 10 to 30 meters in length.
What is that?
And swimming at phenomenal speeds.
Now there it is over there.
But now the crack team of skeptical investigators, Ben Radford and Joe Nickel, are hot on Ogopogo's trail. Flying over the Okanagan Valley, they notice that the lake is serpentine in shape. And, as we'll see later, this may not be a coincidence.
There are lots and lots of stories, and it's a big and beautiful and deep lake, larger, I think, than Loch Ness.
In the case of Ogopogo, one thing that's interesting about it is the variety of video evidence, unlike many of the other lake monsters. There are a handful of videos of Ogopogo which I think are worthy of merit.
Radford is the managing editor of the Skeptical Inquirer magazine. He and Nickel, a veteran investigator, are working on their latest book, a critical look at the evidence for lake monsters around the world. They've come to Okanagan to get to the bottom of the myth.
Well, we got a gorgeous day, though.
Radford and Nickel join Kirk on our Ogopogo research boat. The combination of skeptics and advocate makes for some lively debate over the evidence.
If you were proved wrong at the end of the day, what would prove you wrong? What would prove to you that Ogopogo does not exist?
You'd have to drain the blooming lake, and we'd have to see there was nothing there.
Well, see the difficulty we skeptics. Right.
While a handful of Ogopogo researchers like Kirk claim to have had repeated sightings, veteran boat captain Glenn Kohali has spent years out on the water without ever seeing the beast.
I haven't personally seen anything. Occasionally I'll see a phantom wave. The lake could be totally calm, nothing moving, and all of a sudden you'll get this wave going across the lake without any real reason for it. There's no boat traffic, and for sure, if you just take a glance at that, it looks just like Ogopogo, just like it.
This phantom wave, called a seiche, is common to narrow, deep lakes like Loch Ness and Okanagan, the same lakes that are reputedly homes to monsters. So is this footage, shot by John Kirk, proof of a lake serpent in Okanagan, or just a serpentine rogue wave? Approaching Rattlesnake Island, the valley narrows over a seismic fault line. Here, the lake plunges almost 240 meters in depth. According to Native American legend, this is the home of a ferocious man-eating lake monster.
The First Nations people rarely traverse the lake without bringing some kind of small animal with them which they could throw into the lake to appease the lake demon. If you failed to do this, you incurred its wrath.
Fortunately for the diving team, Ogopogo hasn't attacked a human in recent memory.
Bigger stuff tends to usually hang out on deep walls where it's got the room. So that's why we've picked this spot, Wally, to dive, because it's got that kind of depth.
If Ogopogo does exist, there must be dozens of them in the lake in order to maintain a breeding population. But even in a lake this size, the chances of encountering one are fantastically slim. Dive leader DJ Swanstrom has picked the waters around Rattlesnake Island to improve his chances.
And I mean, this is a deep lake. Does it have the potential to have big stuff? Oh yeah, I mean, if it's going to be big, it's going to be in a lake like Okanagan.
If Ed Bousfield is right, they're not looking for a plesiosaur, long considered the most likely candidate to be a lake monster. Instead, they can expect his Cadborosaurus, a much more serpentine creature with a pair of front flippers and a fan-like tail. The divers won't descend much more than 30 meters. Beyond that, it gets too dangerous and too dark, but that leaves a lot of room for Ogopogo to hide in. With air running low, the divers return to the surface. Their search has been fruitless.
It's just like Okanagan. It's tough diving, not much to see, not a lot of life down there.
The dive team has failed to find a monster, but maybe sonar, which can go deeper than humans, will provide more answers. Sonar operator Daryl Van Dura scans the underwater rift with sound waves.
Keep coming up on it.
The images on the screen are formed by those sound waves echoing back off solid objects in the water.
Into the wind, well, sonar's a little tricky to work with. It's not photographic imagery, it's computer imagery, so unless it's something that you can obviously tell, like it's a ship or an airplane or something, you would have to go back and verify that hit. And with a living creature, it's not likely to be there again when you go back with cameras or divers.
A few years ago, an Ogopogo expedition recorded this image, which shows what appears to be a 13-meter serpentine shape close to the lake bottom. Some claim this must be a biological entity.
One question that I would pose is,
but Van Dura has another theory. He often uses his sonar equipment to salvage sunken trees, and thinks the alleged Ogopogo image looks rather familiar.
It could be a tree trunk of a gnarly crooked tree, which we have a lot of in this country. That would be the first thing that would come to my mind.
The evidence for lake monsters is subjective at best, and what one person sees as a monster, another might see as a tree, or wave, or really big fish. But Ogopogo has also been caught on videotape.
What is that?
What makes Ogopogo different from other lake monsters is that it has been captured on film and video, and not just once or twice, but several times. Arlene Gall has taken on the task of sifting through all this evidence.
Individuals who have seen the creature and have had an experience, they become believers for life. They'll continue to call me.
Her house doubles as a makeshift museum, and as Ben and Joe peruse her archive, they find a treasure trove of fuzzy photos, old film, and home videos.
Claim they are seeing.
For such an elusive creature, Ogopogo is remarkably camera-friendly. There are dozens of pictures and videos claiming to show the creature, and not all of them are easily dismissed. Arlene shows us the three most celebrated examples.
The creature that people are reporting as being Ogopogo.
In the summer of 1980, as Larry Thor was filming his family on a lakeside holiday at Okanagan, an excited crowd began to gather on the beach, pointing to a disturbance about 100 meters out in the water.
I have no idea the size of this creature, but it's extremely large, extremely long. And as we have no whales or submarines in Okanagan Lake, I don't have any other explanation other than what people have been seeing out there.
One thing that intrigued me most about this film is that you do have the bow wave, you know, the crest is coming off of it. It seems to me that it's obviously some sort of living animal.
The alleged monster was reportedly visible for 45 minutes, but Thal took only this 10 seconds of footage.
He decided that he was only going to take a small portion because he wanted to save the rest of the film for his family, and of course this really upset me.
Arlene also shows us the Damara video shot in 1992. This portion of the video shows what appears to be a serpentine creature moving across the lake.
Look at the way it swims. I get very excited every time I see this because I've been waiting for years to have some type of visual.
Why could that not be 3 smaller creatures?
The way it's moving, it seems to be thrusting itself through the water. I'm just watching the way it swims. That's the reason why I believe it's one animal.
In another sequence, we see what looks like multiple heads swimming in the water. Suddenly, a ski boat enters the frame on a collision course with the lake serpents. The boat makes an evasive turn and the skier goes down.
You see it actually in interaction with people, with humans, which is something that you rarely get. So I think it's certainly valuable in terms of that.
And finally, there's the classic film shot by Art Folden in August 1968. These were the first moving images taken of the alleged lake serpent, and they caused quite a stir.
I'm not sure what speed it would be traveling at, but it's going pretty fast as far as I'm concerned.
The Folden film attracted us not because it's good quality. It isn't.
It's pushing water.
We've looked at it repeatedly because so much has been made of it. It's supposed to be some sort of, for some people, almost a holy grail.
Cryptozoologists estimate that the creature in the film is about 275 meters away and 20 meters long. Their conclusion is that it's simply too big and moving too fast to be a known animal.
He was looking along here. This guardrail would not have been here.
Ben and Joe know from experience that these monster-like estimates are often inflated, so they set out to retrace Folden's steps. They want to try to get a more accurate picture of the distance, size and speed of the so-called monster in Folden's film.
These trees are irrelevant, largely.
The first task for Ben and Joe is to find the vantage point from which Folden shot the film.
Way back, this could be comparable. Yeah.
Using a still image from the film, and with the help of lake monster researcher John Kirk, the team agrees on a likely spot. They take a bead on the far side of the lake for reference.
All right, so the idea is that we're going to have surveyors up at the highway site, also down at the shore and on a boat there. And we take GPS coordinates of each place, and then we get the distances measured at different intervals, 20, 50, 75, 100, and 300 yards. Questions, comments? No.
The 10-meter research boat is placed out in the water for scale.
Ready for a 6-meter shot now?
And a survey team with laser equipment sizes up the boat at regular distances from the shoreline.
That's pretty good right there. Okay, we're going to take a picture now. Okay.
When the boat is placed at a distance of 275 meters, the original estimate, it's immediately clear to the investigative team that the mysterious object in the water wasn't nearly that far out.
He wasn't even remotely.
Their new estimate is that the creature was more like 25 meters from the shore, and therefore had to be much smaller and swimming at a considerably slower speed. Kirk, Radford and Nickel all agree. The monster wasn't nearly as monstrous as cryptozoologists originally thought. Their science, however, is less than exact and leaves room for interpretation.
It hasn't dissuaded me that there's an unusual creature in there, but what it has done today is to shrunk the size from the initial estimate way smaller than the 60 and the 70 feet that they were positing back in 1970, and I would say that was smaller by half, at least. So 30 to 40 feet maximum.
You could almost say it's an incredible shrinking lake monster.
But I still see it as being significantly larger than any unknown fauna in this lake, significantly.
But how much of that dark streak is the monster or the creature, and how much is its wake?
Joe and Ben's expedition hasn't changed any minds. But then again, they didn't expect it to.
You have to sort of ask yourself, why do these things thrive in the absence of hard evidence? You know, it's not like there's been any bodies found. So why do people keep it? And part of the reason people keep it is because they like the idea. People want lake monsters.
Lake monsters really function almost like giant rubber ducks. They're unsinkable. You push them down and let go of them and they bob back to the surface.
The size of John Kirk's monster may have diminished, but not his faith.
I'm a witness to this myself. I have seen the phenomenon, and I know what I saw quite clearly. I'm not deluded in any way, shape, or form by what I saw. It's so easy for people who have never had a sighting, or who use the same old hackneyed saw every single time. Eyewitness evidence is unreliable, in which case we should disband our entire judicial system and free all the prisoners from jail.
Before closing the file on Ogopogo, there is one more avenue of investigation to pursue: forensic video analysis. We brought in Grant Fredericks, a forensic video consultant to the FBI, to see if he could shed any light on the video evidence for Ogopogo.
When we look at videotape, we often see that the videotape shows us something different than a witness has stated. And it's not that they're being insincere, it's just that they may have their own personal biases. The camera doesn't have a bias.
First, he analyzes the film shot by Art Folden in 1968 on grainy 8mm film.
I thought this was very interesting. I was actually kind of compelled on this, but there's clearly something causing something happening in the water.
Fredericks focuses on a sequence perceived to be a bow wake followed by a dark object, the alleged lake monster moving through the water.
We can see that there's a light object in front of this darker object. This object is quite reflective, very, very consistent with the side of a silver fish.
Fredericks has done a lot of fishing in this region, and he knows firsthand that a big, bright fish, followed by a long, dark wake, can give the wrong impression.
I think if one were looking for a monster and saw this, that monster would be in that person's mind's eye. It's not on the film.
He then turns to the more recent Damaro video, shot in 1992. This video even had the skeptics scratching their heads.
There appears to be pretty aggressive tidal movement sort of in this area. This is very consistent with debris from a fallen tree in the water, because the objects, they very slowly sort of bob up and bob down.
Grant points out that the objects don't react to the boat, and the water skier doesn't react to the objects.
I don't think that I would be that calm if I'd fall among a group of monsters now.
Finally, he looks at the Thor film.
I don't think this one's a problem in explaining it. You know, this has all the characteristics of waves moving. I don't see anything that would tell me that this is something out of the ordinary.
As scientists often point out, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and as yet, Ogopogo falls a long way short of absolute proof. But even if Ogopogo and its many cousins around the world don't exist, we still haven't ruled out the possibility of another kind of monster of the deep. The sea monster. An elusive animal could easily hide in our vast oceans, away from the prying eyes of science. And in fact, mysterious things do wash up on coastlines fairly frequently, like this giant mass of gelatinous flesh found on the shores of Chile in 2003. These findings inevitably fuel the hopes that a sea monster, such as the legendary giant octopus, has been found. As with most suspected sea monsters, a piece of the Chilean flesh eventually made its way into the laboratory of Dr. Skip Pierce at the University of South Florida.
We've had blobs really shipped to us from all over the world.
usually in Ziploc bags, preserved in all sorts of things from rum to formaldehyde. They usually smell bad.
Dr. Pierce is a molecular biologist who has tested samples dating back to the late 1800s, including the St. Augustine monster and the infamous Tasmanian specimen.
By launch, land and in the air, we search for a sea monster. This is the Pymon River on the rugged and only partly explored west coast of Tasmania.
The Tasmanian monster, which washed in the 1960s, that was on the beach for 2 years.
Bringing back specimens was quite a job. The toughened hide of the monster would only yield to the axe, and when cut, the flesh gave off a pungent odor similar to ammonia or an overripe cheese.
It turns out that many of these samples, including the Tasmanian monster, bear marked similarities to the recent Chilean finding. Pierce dissolves a sample of the Chilean monster in hydrochloric acid to find out what type of protein it's made of, and the microscope confirms the usual suspect, whale blubber.
You can see it clearly. It matches exactly the pattern of fibers in humpback whale blubber. It takes a long time for a whale to rot completely, and if the whale floats around long enough, everything rots away except for this protein, and this protein is almost undegradable.
So far, Dr. Pierce has never seen evidence of a monster.
They've all been identified. Any sea monster where there's been an existing piece that has gotten into a laboratory has been identified. And so far, it hasn't turned out to be anything unknown, I regret to say. The lesson is everybody likes a sea monster.
One of the most beloved and most visible of sea monsters takes its name from the waters of Cadborough Bay near Vancouver. Based on hundreds of sightings, Cadborosaurus wilsey was introduced in a publication by marine biologist Ed Bousfield and oceanographer Paul LeBlond. It's commonly known as Caddy.
There's been lots of sightings of Caddy around Victoria and all along this coast and in the Gulf Islands and in Saanich Inlet. There's been hundreds of observations of Caddy over the last 100 years or so. So this is Caddy's playground. It's been seen in other places along the coast as well, both to the north and to the south.
Not only has Caddy been sighted, but some people think a specimen was actually found in 1937 at a whaling station in Maiden Harbour. When whale butchers sliced open the belly of a whale, they apparently discovered this carcass, one unlike any they had ever seen before. LeBlond and Bousfield think it fits the description of Cadborosaurus perfectly. The same reptilian-shaped head, serpentine body, front flippers, and a fan-shaped tail.
We think that it might be a specimen of Caddy. Nobody's come up and said to us, "You dumb-wits, this is a such and such." No. So it remains a mystery creature.
Unfortunately, the specimen disappeared, but LeBlond and Bousfield feel certain that the creature exists. According to them, it's basically a giant sea snake, up to 30 meters in length, but with a pair of front flippers and the ability to breathe underwater.
It's got some kind of a aquatic respiratory mechanism, perhaps millions of little respiratory hairs on its undersurface, in which gaseous exchange takes place at the water surface.
This is where mainstream marine biologists agree to disagree.
There is no precedent for a water-breathing reptile. You're getting into some technicalities of reptile life, all of which mitigate against the monsters being reptiles, because they have to do reptile things. Number one on the reptile hit parade is breathe air.
The overwhelming mass of evidence, hard and documentary evidence, from hundreds of people over 3,000 miles of coastline and more than 2 centuries of time, indicates that there is no possibility that this is fraudulent.
Fiction or fact, sea serpent sightings have begun to occur further south, and now the San Francisco Bay Area in California may be witnessing the birth of a new monster legend, a mega serpent known as Franny. In 1983, not one but 5 people witnessed an astonishing event. They were part of a road construction crew working on a scenic stretch of the Pacific Coast Highway just north of San Francisco when their flagman radioed in an alarming call.
Hey Marlene, you need to check something out here. There's something really big coming your way.
Something unusually large and fast was making a monster-sized wake out in the water. Marlene Martin, the supervisor, took the call and went to look.
I started seeing this wake, but it didn't seem like anything was pulling it. And all of a sudden it came up, and it just started splashing all over. And it seemed like it had about 3.5 humps. I never saw the end of it. I never saw the tail. The head was very difficult to describe, very ferocious looking. It wasn't a friendly looking creature.
But when it comes to sea serpent sightings, nothing rivals the life-changing experience of twins Bill and Bob Clark, who claim to have looked the terrifying monster in the eye. The Clark twins had their first close encounter with the magnificent beast on a winter morning in 1985, as they were taking in the view of the Golden Gate Bridge.
The Clark brothers in San Francisco Bay have been studying this animal for the past 20 years. I am convinced that their 20-year study of this species is one of the most credible of all studies that have been carried, including our own.
According to Bill and Bob Clark, their first run-in with the mega serpent took them completely by surprise.
We would come down here early in the morning before we went to work and have a cup of coffee, a donut, and then relax and look at the beautiful view in San Francisco Bay.
As they watched, they noticed a group of sea lions. Then suddenly, they realized that something was in hot pursuit. A creature they could only describe as a great sea serpent rose up out of the water.
Felt like I was looking at a dinosaur. I felt like I was a million years in the past watching this creature come through the water. You can see his head. And its head was sticking up like this, and it had these 4 coils directly behind its head. And as it was there, I could see it turning around, looking around, obviously looking for the sea lion. They were just sitting there frolicking. They didn't even know it was coming. And then when it got right there, within a few feet, that's when it telescoped up. That's what's really shocked me, because I thought it was another sea lion. In an instant, this thing stuck its neck straight up. I mean, like a telephone pole. It was like boom, and then down into the group. Right into the group. And they all just started scattering. I could see the animal ripping its neck. Yeah, it's like fast. And I thought if it even saw us moving in the car, that it would crash through the windshield. So I told Bob, don't move at all.
Ever since their first encounter, Bill and Bob Clark have been monitoring the bay, and they claim 8 different sightings between 1985 and 1987, including an astonishing run-in with a young serpent.
And the last time we saw it was the time when we saw the baby with it. All of a sudden, this little black head sticks up out of the water, just tilts its head sideways, opens up its mouth, and it started growling at us. I could tell it was looking straight at us. And it was like a growl and a hiss, because it was more like a rah, rah.
After these dramatic encounters, they saw nothing more for 17 years. Then in January of 2004, they got a new video camera. And while scanning the bay near Alcatraz, they shot this footage of what they think is a mega serpent thrashing about in the distance. They sent their video to Dr. Bousfield.
The movie sequence shows this animal moving steadily from right to left for several minutes at a fair speed. Sea snakes don't occur in this part of the world, and they're far too small. Birds are far too small to fit this image as well. So imperfect as this video camera result is, by a process of elimination, the probability is high that indeed this is a Cadborosaurus-like animal.
We asked forensic video specialist Grant Fredericks to take a look at the Clark's Cadborosaurus. It was shot on a long lens without a tripod, so he minimizes the camera shake by giving each frame a firm point of reference. Once the image is stabilized, the large serpentine animal that Dr. Bousfield and the Clarks believed to have seen becomes more clearly defined. The alleged serpent is actually several smaller objects moving in formation.
They're not connected. These are separate individual objects that are a different size, a different shape, and that are not moving in unison. They're moving apart from each other.
Something in the foreground of the video gives a clue as to what kind of objects they are.
My common sense tells me that it acts like a bird, it flies like a bird, feeds like a bird. It's probably a bird.
But Bill and Bob Clark are undeterred. They know what they saw and hope they get to see it again.
My instruction to the jury would be, use your common sense.
Three smaller creatures.
It's mostly the shape of the head.
Don't take somebody who is passionate
Only one sea serpent of
about
this type.
their evidence.
The animal whipping its neck. That's like fast.
Look at perhaps other explanations.
An otter, for example, or a beaver.
We don't have 12-foot beavers in Okanagan Lake or 12-foot otters.
Until a carcass is discovered, the debate over lake and sea monsters will rage on. Yet the absence of hard evidence doesn't diminish the appeal of these monsters. Whether they truly live in the depths of our oceans and lakes, or simply in the unfathomable depths of the human imagination.
Lake monsters are useful to tell us something about what people's hopes and dreams are.
Not allowing the possibility of a biological life form living in this lake and just shutting the door, and it's a very sad indictment of where science is going. Where has the spirit of discovery and adventure gone?
No sea monsters have ever shown up. As soon as one shows up, I retract everything I've said so far.
I don't know what the answer is. All I know is that although it's extremely rare, the animal is there, if you can only find a way to catch them.
This is the most notorious haunted house in the world. It is to be found in the sleepy seaside town of Amityville, an hour away from the hustle and bustle of New York City. 30 years ago, a truly horrifying crime was committed here, when 6 members of the DeFeo family were shot dead in a single night. Even now,